Hi, I am Katina Horton, the love and freedom toxic relationship recovery coach. And today's Bible teaching is entitled Six Reasons Why We Often Do Not Set Boundaries, Part 1. And before I get into the Bible teaching, I just want to remind you that we do what? We wear a tie so that we can make an impact. That means we're analyzing, we are troubleshooting, we're implementing, empowering, and impacting the women in our homes, in our communities, and around the world. And the quickest and easiest way that you can do that is by doing what? Sharing this message, hitting the like button, and sharing this message allows people who need valuable information on biblical truths, healing, and wholeness to get the information, right? It's just as simple as that. And so, without further ado, I am going to get straight on into the message, right? And first of all, you might ask yourself, what is boundaries? Boundaries are life gates, right? And those life gates are composed of principles, standards, values, and rules that you live by to govern your mind, body, soul, and spirit. And boundaries help to give people a better understanding of our identity. And what I used to think is like, okay, if you set a boundary, then what happens is that it takes away from you. Boundaries, it helps to expand other people's knowledge as far as our identity is concerned, right? And the tricky thing about boundaries is that enforcing them can be hard and intimidating at first. But then on the other side of that, not enforcing them leads you to a lifetime of bondage, right? And so anytime that a person, a place, a thing, or an idea can be used as bait to keep us in a certain position, we are entangled into a lifestyle of slavery. And in Galatians 5 and 1, it says, it is for freedom. And this was Paul talking, right, to the church. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery, right? So, say for instance, your girlfriend calls you up and she says, girl, what should I do? He did this to me, and then he did that to me, and then he did this to me, and he did that to me. And she's going on and on and on, right? And she's referring to her romantic partner who's narcissistic, right? Or she might be referring to her girlfriend. She did this to me, and then she did that to me, and then she did this to me, and then she did that to me, right? And then in the conversation, you're like, well, I can give you some suggestions, some advice, but the ultimate decision is going to have to be made from you. I cannot tell you what to do, right? I'm responsible for myself. You're responsible for yourself, of course, but I can just give you some advice if that's what you're asking me, right? And so then you give her advice and tell her about setting up boundaries, and that the person keeps taking advantage of her. This guy keeps taking advantage of her, even though this guy is her husband, right? And so what happens is that the conversation goes on and on in this circular motion, and this is going on for 2 hours, right? It's going nowhere, right? It ain't going nowhere. And then another example of this, the same 2-hour conversation that you've had with your friend has been going on literally for 10 years. She's telling you the same thing. You are giving the same advice about these same two situations. Her romantic partner who is narcissistic, and her friend who she feels is taking advantage of her, right? So this conversation has been going on for 10 years, right? And it reminds you of that song that goes, you got me going in circles, right? And so you going round and round and round in circles in this conversation. That's what a circular conversation does. You keep going around and round, but you ain't going nowhere, right? And like the song says, around and around I go, and I'm strung out over you. You end up being so tied to these situations that are literally going nowhere. It's like we talk about with the trauma, disconnection, lack cycle of addiction. You get on that hamster wheel and you keep going and going and going, but you're going nowhere. And so that's what happens when you end up in a circular conversation with someone. They say the same thing, you say the same thing, and then you right back at home plate, and then they say the same thing and you say the same thing. And this is going on and on for 2 hours. And then the next thing you know, 10 years, it's the same conversation. And you know it's bad when you've got teenage children or someone else around is like, you guys have been saying the same thing for years. That's when you know it's a problem. If other people around you can tell you exactly what the other person is probably going to say and how you are going to respond to the drama, it's a circular conversation, right? It ain't going nowhere, right? And so what happens, what makes it so hard when it comes to us giving boundaries in these romantic relationships, friendships, it could be what? Other sisters and brothers in Christ. It could be business partners, ministry partners. It could be, even sometimes with family. When it comes to setting up boundaries, what happens, what makes it so difficult is because of that fear, right? That underlying fear that's underneath there, right? And so what happens is that we want to give trust to people who are not fitting in the 5 essential categories that Dr. Henry Cloud has set up for us in his recent book that's entitled Trust, right? He gives 5 essential musts in order for trust to be there. And the first one, number 1, is understanding. And he explains that the person has to understand you. And so if there's not an understanding of you, you can't trust that person, right? If we're trying to trust a person who does not show that they understand who we are, we're headed for trouble. And then the next thing is that the person has to have the right motive. And that's another thing. If they do not have the right motive, if they're not for you, if they're gaslighting you to escape responsibility, if they're deceiving you all the time, they don't have the right motive. Number 3 that he says is necessary for trust, and that is the person has to have the ability. And so there's a lot of grief and loss associated with that, because some people can understand you, some people can have the right motive, right, and everything, but some people just do not have the ability, right? And so just because they don't have the ability in one area does not mean that they don't have the ability for you to trust them in other areas, right? So you might be able to talk to them about your emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being, but you might not be able to talk to them about money because they have different belief systems. And when your belief system clashes with their belief system, then it's a problem, right? Or you might be able to talk to them about spiritual things, but then you notice when it comes to something else that's going against their belief system, then that ends up being a problem, right? And so when that ability is not there and we try to make it be there, we are in essence hurting ourselves, right? We are deciding, okay, I'm not going to set the boundary because of the fact that what? I want something to happen that can't, because that person is they're unable to, right? They don't have the capability, right? They don't have the ability. But I want it so badly that I'm going to pretend like it's there, which is only in turn going to hurt you in the process, right? And so what happens is that sometimes the ability might not be there because of toxicity. Sometimes the ability might not be there because of emotional immaturity. Sometimes the ability might not be there because that's just not that person's expertise. They're not gifted or skilled in that area. So it's like you go hire a gynecologist, right, to help you with a female problem, right? Instead of you go hire a podiatrist rather to help you with a female problem. A podiatrist does not have the ability to tell you what's going on with female areas because they've gone to school for another specialty, right? So is it saying that the podiatrist won't understand you? No, we're not saying that. Doesn't mean that the podiatrist does not have a good motive for you, that he's for you. No, we're not saying that. Both of those can be checked off, but he does not have the ability to do what? Take care of what needs to be taken care of because it's not his area of expertise. So sometimes when it comes to trust, right, and us setting boundaries, and a person doesn't have the ability, remember, it may not necessarily be about every area. It might just be 1, 2, or 3 areas. It might be one area. And it might just be the majority of things where you're just having literal surface conversations, right? And then the fourth thing that he says that we need to be watching out for is the character of a person, right? If it's not a person of integrity, then, we can't go anywhere from that. Then we keep setting ourselves up to be set up, so to speak, right? And then what happens too is that as far as the character is concerned, if they are a person that we know of, they've got basically, them with their pattern of behavior, they're sowing seeds of discord, they're sowing division everywhere they go, they are bullying people, whether it be in the workplace or at church, or, even if it's with your children at school and you're trying to teach them about boundaries, if they're bullying your child, right? There's something wrong with their character. Something's going on. And whether it is or is not that person's fault is not the issue here. The issue is setting up a boundary to protect your own life gates, right? Boundaries are not for other people. Boundaries are for us, right? And then the fifth thing that Dr. Henry Cloud states when it comes to trust, being able to trust somebody, the fifth thing he talks about is what? Having a track record. So we've got understanding, and then we've got motive, and then we've got ability, we've got character. And the fifth thing is track record. So if a person if they got a track record of doing something, and then we keep allowing the life gate to to our mind, body, soul, and spirit to be open, then what happens is each time the mind, body, soul, and spirit is going to suffer unnecessary damage, right? They've already had a track record. And so the first reason why it's so hard for us to set boundaries is because the person you're in a relationship with is supplying a need for you, right? And so we're going to talk about 4 needs today. It's hundreds of needs that you could be getting from that other person. We're only going to discuss 4 today, right? And that first need is sex. You see what I'm saying? And so what you'll say is, well, it's just going to be one night. And then one night, well, it was just 2 nights. And then 2 nights, well, it's just been a month. And then the next thing you know, you and this individual literally have a movie entitled Trauma Bonded, Soul Tied, and Lust. And so then your best friend or some other friend in your inner circle, some other sister in Christ, they say, so are you guys an item now? Well, not really. We more of a, just kind of like a friends with benefits, we're just kind of good friends. So are you in a situationship? Well, not really. Then what would you call it? Well, I don't know what I would call it. I don't think we figured that out yet. And then your friend is just like, okay, you haven't figured this out yet, but this has been going on for a month. Okay. I just wanted to bring that to your attention, right? And so what happens is that when we can't define what it is we're in, for sure, we're not going to be able to define boundaries for what we're in because we can't even identify it ourselves, right? And so Samson, he was used to being the king of riddles, and he lost the game to 30 Philistine men due to his wife betraying him, right? By giving the secret to his riddles. This set him off. And so instead of dealing with the situation, right? His way of dealing with the situation was what? I'm just going to up and abandon my wife. I'm leaving her. I'm piecing out. And of course, abandonment has its own repercussions, right? She betrayed him. We can't overlook that. If somebody betrays you, you can't overlook the fact that what? Betrayal, trauma is soon to follow, right? And someone gives you a piece of information in confidence in a vulnerable moment, and you take that information and use it against them. That's betrayal of trust, right? And so you can't ignore that. His solution was, I'm going to abandon her, right? So obviously he had that flight trauma response going on, right? Just escape the situation, hop on a plane and leave, right? Peace out, go somewhere for 2-3 weeks and then come back and think everything was going to be the same. That's what Samson thought, right? I'm just going to peace out and I'm going to come back and we're going to pick up like where we left off at. And a lot of times this situation occurs even with parents, whether it's the mother or the father that has abandoned their child. They're not trying to repair the relationship. They're not trying to reconcile and then restore. They think they come back in with a gift and it's all going to be good. And that's what Samson did. And over in Judges 14 and 19, it says, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully on him. He went down to Ashkelon and killed 30 of their men. He stripped them and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. In a rage, Samson returned to his father's house, and his wife was given to one of the men who had accompanied him. And then over in Judges 15, 1 through 2, it said, later on, during the harvest, the wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat as a gift and visited his wife. I want to go to my wife in her room, he said, but her father would not let him enter. I was sure you hated her, her father said. So I gave her to one of the men who accompanied you. Isn't her younger sister more beautiful? Can you imagine someone taking your spouse and giving them to someone else, right? And what was Samson's solution for all of it, though? Just go get another Philistine woman. Go and get up under another Philistine woman, right? Judges 16, 1 through 2, it says, Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute, and went to bed with her. When the Gazites heard that Samson was there, they surrounded the place and waited in ambush for him all that night at the city gate. All right? And so what happens is that the same thing with you. When it didn't go well in your relationship, when you were married 15 years, you went through the whole entire narcissistic abuse cycle. The whole thing played out. The grand finale during the discard phase is that he ended up doing a fake suicide stunt on his part because he was losing control of you. And that was the only way he felt to keep you emotionally tied, right? And trapped to him, right? And bonded, right? You don't know which way is up, which way is down, because your whole identity was stolen by him, right? You gave your power away unknowingly, and your soul has been damaged by trauma and abuse. But your solution is, if I can just go and get up under another man, right? And you find your type. Remember, we talked about this before. You have placed type alignment over value alignment. And whenever we're placing type alignment over value alignment, we are headed for trouble, right? And so what happens is that for the second reason that you're not setting boundaries is because this person is providing a ride for you. You don't have a car, so you think this person is providing you with the luxury. They're picking you up, taking you to the grocery store, taking you to the doctor's visits, taking you to museums, taking you to appointments, etc. And it's not that you can't even do these things on your own, right? You have to pay money on the bus to go do these things. But you figure, who wants to pay money to take the bus? If your friend is offering to take you, hey, then why not, right? Your friend is happily taking care of her business. You guys run out. She's happily getting her groceries and all of these other crafts and all these other things done, right? But when it comes to yours, well, I know I told you I had 3 or 4 different stores I'll take you to, but how about you just get everything at this store that I'm going in as well? And so it leaves you feeling some kind of way, right? More than likely, you're going to be angry. That's going to be one of the kind of ways, because you're going to think, well, if I had known this, I could have just taken the bus, right? Why did I have to even put up with this, right? Because you know what it is you need for your body. That's not for anyone else to what? Be able to tell you. Only you know what you need, right? You have special health issues and concerns, but only you know what your body needs, right? And so like each and every other time, she was the one who volunteered, right? She was the one who volunteered to take you. And you're thinking to yourself, well, if she knew she was going to have all this stuff to do, why would she volunteer? But think about it. Go back to those 5 essentials that Dr. Henry Cloud talked about when it comes to trust. And that 5th one being track record. If this has already happened 20 times before, when you went to the grocery store, what makes you think that it's not going to happen the 21st time? Is there any proof? Because the scripture tells us hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. And in these narcissistic relationships, they like to make false promises, right? Because those false promises lead to false hope. And you hanging on and hanging on and hanging on. And all that's doing is reinforcing the trauma bond between you and that individual, right? And so the other thing is that you're going to be conflicted inside too, because one part of you is going to say, well, I know, I can talk to them. We can sit and laugh and talk together. When we get together, we have a good time. I can share some vulnerable moments with her. But then the other side of you is also thinking, but if every time we're doing this, this person's devaluing me, or they are not allowing me to get the things that I need for myself, something's wrong. So it's going to be an inner conflict, right? Got a little sinus going on here. It's going to be an inner conflict, an inner struggle going on, right? And yes, it's her fault that she's behaving the way it is. Nobody can force anybody to behave the way that they behave. It's on us to self-regulate. At the same time, it's also upon us to stop the vicious cycle, right? And one way of, hold on just a second. One way of us being able to set a boundary in this situation with the friend is to sit down and just ask her, do you have a minute? Can I sit down and talk to you for a minute? You might say, because sometimes things might get better. 9 times out of 10, if this is the pattern of behavior for someone like this, there's toxicity involved, there's emotional maturity involved, there's all kind of things involved in this situation, right? That don't sound right? And so you might end up telling the person something like, I love you. I love our relationship. I value the relationship. And, but the thing about it is that every time we get together to go and do something that you've actually come to me and offered, I don't even end up being able to get my things done. You see what I'm saying? You get yours done, and that's fine. I know that's the main reason for you leaving out, but you're the one that volunteered, right? So even if I need to go to the grocery store 3 or 4 times a week on the bus, that's what I'm going to do. And then if I have time, during the times you go, I'll just go as far as like a fun trip, right? Because what I don't want to do is have it where I'm going with you and I'm never getting the things taken care of that I need to get taken care of, right? I have to take care of my needs first, right? And I love and value our relationship. And so I'm hoping that you're going to be okay with this, right? And so what happens is that 9 times out of 10 is the situation that I've already explained. The person is going to have a problem with it. And one of the reasons why the person is going to have a problem with it is because they've already set up a track record. They've done this 20 times before. You are calling out the behavior. And we talked about last week, when you call out someone's behavior and they are toxic, narcissistic, and perhaps even emotionally immature, they are going to do a DARVO on you. And DARVO stands for denial, attack, and reverse victim and offender, right? So you are going to end up being attacked because you've called out their behavior. And so this could end up being a really tricky situation, but it's also, even though it's a tricky situation, it's necessary in order for you to break the cycle within yourself, right? And it'll be some pushback probably, because what happens is when we set boundaries, the other person's response is usually, well, who does she think she is? A person that loves myself, right? But they don't see it that way. When they cannot control you, right? By using whatever it is that whatever you've given them as bait to use, when they cannot no longer control you, and you are using your own mind, body, soul, and spirit to make decisions according to what it is you need, there is always going to be a problem, right? And so when you need your love, honor, and respect, right? When your need to love, honor, and respect yourself, that is, when that outweighs the need another person is using as bait to control you, You know you're ready to move forward and to set boundaries, right? And then situation number 3, as far as what it is that they're using, the need that you have as far as what they're using for bait over you would be validation through perfectionism, right? This was Moses's problem. Moses had a codependent relationship with the people of Israel. He served as their coach, guiding them across the Red Sea. However, the people of Israel went from placing their identity in Pharaoh to placing their identity in Moses, right? As they say, from the fire to the frying pan, or vice versa, right? They were used to what I call a trauma, disconnection, lack cycle of addiction: love, approval, comfort, and knowledge addictions. They were done with Pharaoh, but they wanted Moses to serve in the same capacity. Trauma is always trying to steal your identity and attach it to people, places, things, and ideas, enabling you to use those people, places, things, and ideas to keep you in a vicious cycle of numbing out. But you can't stay in a numbed out cycle forever. You got to come out of it, right? And when you come out, you're going to feel the feelings, you're going to feel the emotions. Part of it is probably going to be depression because you have not allowed yourself to feel. And once that come on, and the hopelessness and despair, and if you don't self-regulate, you'll be right back on that hamster wheel, numbing out once again with whatever addictions you use to numb out, right? If you don't come up with healthy coping mechanisms, that is, right? This is the same way with the Israelites. The love and approval addictions came from the seed of rejection when they placed Pharaoh in God's position. The comfort addictions came in from being breadcrumbed with onions and leeks and garlic and cucumbers and melon and free fish. Okay, that was only reinforcing their trauma bonds. The knowledge addictions came in when the people of Israel were taught by God himself, right? And through Moses, how to live right through the 10 commandments, right? And then they just kept learning and learning and learning. Learning the 10 commandments and all the other commandments, doing nothing with that knowledge. No life application, right? And life application means what? Wisdom. They had to learn new coping mechanisms, right? Which is why God wanted them in the wilderness to get them alone so that they can focus on worshiping him, not Pharaoh, right? And learning a new way of living, a new mindset. They had limited worldviews. He wanted them to rebuild their minds, rebuild their bodies, rebuild their souls, rebuild their spirits. When you're trying to rebuild and you're remaining in the same toxic environment with the same people and the same toxicity, you're starting out at a negative, right? And so in order to save Moses, his mom put him in a basket and sent him down the river. But Moses dealt with abandonment and rejection issues. And that seed of rejection placed in him through love and approval addictions, right? He was getting his needs met. No, Moses was getting his needs met through the people, asking him questions from morning all the way till night, appearing to be the only one who had the answers. It was a setup for destruction from the beginning. They were addicted to going to him. He was addicted to them coming to him because he needed the validation and approval, right? So it was not a one-way street. This was a codependent relationship. Had Moses' father-in-law not intervened and given him some advice, he would have been burnt out. It would have been burnt out on both ends, resentment on both ends, disappointment and discontentment, right? No one can provide all of what we need, right? Nor all of what Moses, the people can provide all what Moses needed. Moses can provide what all the people needed. The only person that can do that is God. And the same thing is true for you and for me, right? And so in scripture, it says, the next day Moses sat down to judge the people. And they stood around Moses from morning until evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw everything he was doing for them, he asked, what is this you're doing for the people? Why are you alone sitting as judge while all the people stand around you from morning until evening? Moses replied to his father-in-law, because the people came to me to inquire of God. Whenever they have a dispute, it comes to me and I make a decision between one man and another. I teach them God's statutes and laws. What you're doing is not good. Moses' father-in-law said to him, you will certainly wear out both yourself and these people who are with you because the task is too heavy for you. You can't do it alone. Now listen to me. I will give you some advice and God be with you. You be the one to represent the people before God and bring their cases to him. Instruct them about the statutes and laws. Teach them the way to live and what they must do. But you should select from all the people able men, God-fearing, trustworthy. There go that trust word again. And hating dishonest profit. Place them over the people as commanders of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They should judge the people at all the times. They can bring you every major case, but judge every minor case themselves. In this way, you will lighten your load, and they bear it with you. If you do this, and God so directs you, you will be able to endure. And also, all these people will be able to go home satisfied. Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. So Moses chose able men from all Israel and made them leaders over the people as commanders of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Okay. And so what's worth pointing out here is that Moses didn't have to take his father-in-law's advice. He could have become defensive. No. That's not what I'm doing. This is good. This is good what I'm doing. His unresolved trauma could have triggered shame, his insecurities. Then he could have pulled out a Darvo, right? Without even knowing it. Because when Darvo becomes a trauma response, it's toxic, and the person who's doing Darvo doesn't even recognize that they're doing it, right? And what happens is Darvo also could be pulled out through not just toxicity, but what? Having a limited worldview. And when you have limited worldview and emotional immaturity together, it blocks knowledge. And remember, the word knowledge means light. So there's no light coming in. You're surrounded. It's like being on a train and being in the tunnel, right? You've got tunnel vision, all that darkness around you. And it's a little bit of light you can see. But other than that, like 90% of you is surrounded in darkness, right? And so the fourth thing we're going to talk about, the fourth way that your needs end up preventing you, right, from setting boundaries is that you are hungry. Okay? You are hungry. And a person who is hungry, what? You're in trouble. Okay? Whenever you are hungry for food, you can use that. It can be used to invalidate and devalue what's valuable. When you are hungry, right? And food is used, you're at the mercy of getting something to eat. It can invalidate and devalue what's valuable, right? You got a married man inviting you on a date. He's offering to take you to a restaurant that serves $300 meals and $100 desserts. And you're all for it, but this is a married man. And the scripture says, and this is Genesis 29 to 34. Once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stew, for I'm exhausted. Therefore, his name was called Edom. Jacob said, sell me your birthright right now. Esau said, I'm about to die. Of course, what's the use of birthright to me? Jacob said, swear to me now. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Then Esau despised his birthright. Lack of self-control, reflection, and boundaries, right? And your understanding of your value will have you despise the very thing that's used as bait to keep you in the position you are in. Remember, you are enough. Reclaim your power, soul, and identity today. And then I want to challenge you to reclaim the power, soul, and identity of your calling. Grab your keys to the kingdom and get your inheritance. Again, my name is Katina Horton, the Love and Freedom Toxic Relationship Recovery Coach. I love you. God bless you. And until next time.